Step into the captivating world of the Behind the Curtain podcast, where your dynamic hosts, John Dyer and Dr. Mohamed Saleh, bring together a wealth of 60 years of combined experience in healthcare and manufacturing. Join us every week as we delve into intriguing topics, weaving unscripted conversations that promise to take you on an unpredictable and enlightening journey. Gain valuable insights for your continuous improvement adventure as we navigate uncharted territories with enthusiasm and expertise. Welcome to a podcast that goes beyond the ordinary, unraveling the mysteries behind the curtain of knowledge.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Behind the Curtain. I'm John Dyer, and with me is Dr. Mohamed Saleh. And we're here today to talk about employee language, how, the different ways employees communicate their feelings, their ambitions, their morale, basically their attitude towards the company. And all that comes out in how they interact with us. So, Mohamed, why don't you kind of start us off by explaining a little bit more about what do we mean by this whole concept of employee language?
John, it took me many years to kind of appreciate this. And a lot of times when you go into organizational change and try to shift the culture, you miss the big picture of what is the culture currently, what's the current state of the culture. And so in our last series of episodes, we really talked about the leadership team and what could leadership do. And now flipping the paradigm to the employees, when you start doing a change effort in an organization, you're going to start noticing that they use certain language if you pay attention to the language. And it's paramount when we talk about leadership participation and leadership practices that in our efforts of doing gimbal walks and in our efforts of doing things, that we're mindful of those languages. And I read a book called Tribal Leadership. It's one of my favorite books. If any of our listeners have not read it, I highly recommend it. It's by Dave Logan, John King, and Haley Fisher Wright. And they talked about that there's languages in each tribe, and I'm not going to get too much into the book. I'm just going to, at a high level, talk about some of the key learnings I took away from it, is that you have kind of different types of tribes, and they talk about 5 different types of tribes. The ones I want to focus on today is there is this language from employees when you go into a company where they feel like they're the complete victim. They got dealt a bad hand, and the world sucks, and they start clustering together almost like gangs. They're very loyal to each other. But they feel like because life has given them a bad hand, they could do whatever they need to do. They could steal, they could lie, they could, that's their rules. As long as they're loyal to the group, everyone outside of the group is kind of a bad person. And that's a very dangerous group. However, very unlikely to find this in big corporations, but you might still find small pockets of those within organizations. When you see people that have to write their name on their staplers, there's stealing going on. And so that might be a symptom of that. Then you have another language that you might find among a different population. And this is a little bit more common in organizations where they also feel like the victim. However, you almost feel from their language that they're giving up. They're exhausted. They're burnt out. The words they'll use is like, we've tried this multiple times. It doesn't work. Nothing works. And no amount of trying will ever amount to anything. And regardless of whatever change effort you're proposing, you see no passion behind it. And sometimes they're even defined as resistors. That's another type of group. And a little bit of a thing that to pay attention to is that same group sometimes tries to shine out the boss. And they always talk about the boss, how amazing he is and stuff like that. And they'll even tell you they're on board with initiatives. but behind the scenes, there's no passion to get it done and almost self-sabotaging it just to kind of prove that nothing works. Then you have the third group. The third group for me is the most dangerous group. And unfortunately, for any change agent out there that's trying to do team-based transformations, call it lean or call it whatever organizational design you're trying to change, these people are really engaged. And they're out there helping you. They're telling you we could do this. Yes, we got it. And when you start honing in on the language they're speaking, you're going to notice that they're using the word I a lot. And it's about them. They're using this vehicle to promote them, not to promote the company, not to help the company, but to build their own resume, to build their own legacy. So everything around that is winning is all that matters, and it's all about them. And they're smarter than everyone. These people often talk about like how busy they are all the time, and they don't get support from the organization that they should. But you'll start noticing that language come out. These people are really hard to work with because they already feel like they're a legacy in their own head. They already think that they're smarter than everyone, and everyone around them doesn't know what they're doing. So when you start talking about collaboration and team-based collaboration and concepts of like Kaizen, where you need a cross-functional team come together, it's very, it steals their power away. They're very power hungry. And so in the forefront, they look amazing, but when you dig under the hood, they become very dangerous. And then there's the fourth type. And the fourth type is really what we want to get to the organizations, is that these are people that are very team-based. They have, shared decision-making. They're looking at the information moves freely. They're looking at the best next thing that they could do that's going to help the company. And they use the word we a lot. We could do this. We are able to do this. And a lot of times a president or a CEO might be in the we world, and they might be talking to an I individual, and it doesn't mesh. And they're like, why are these people not getting it? Or this person says, how could I stomp on this we person? And once they enter that tribe, they break that tribe apart and they bring them back into the I. And so if you're not paying it, when you're looking at employee engagement, especially employee participation, if you're not paying attention to those words being used, sometimes you're speaking hieroglyphics to these people because they're in a, I'm a victim, and you're talking about, look at utopia that we could build. And they're like, dude, nothing works here. We've tried a million things before. So that's what I mean by language.
Gotcha. So it's interesting because if you really think about what you've just described, is that more of a symptom of the underlying issues for that organization, right? So in other words, if there's a lack of trust between the leaders and the employees, that's where you can get that victimhood, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, we believe in safety. We want a safe work environment, but people are getting hurt every week. And, and word spreads throughout the organization. And it's like, oh, the leaders don't care about us. Well, then, I'm a victim, and rightfully so. So again, and then all the way to the I mentality, right? Well, if the leaders who are getting promoted within the organization are those that show the most control, use of fear, use of, promoting themselves, well, then that builds that reputation within the organization so that the employees at all levels, even the workers, are like, well, in order to get ahead in this company, you got to, make yourself look good and maybe even at the expense of everybody else.
Yeah.
And then to the last group, the people that we want to get engaged and involved, the collaborators. Well, how much of a job have we done to focus people on the organization winning, beating the competition versus, if you have a bunch of silos within the organization, well, now you're maybe competing with another function, but we're still part of the same company. Mm-hmm. Well, that doesn't cut it, because now, we're still being taught that it's okay to tear parts of the other company down. Well, no, we're all part of the same team. So how do you shift the focus from winning as an individual or as a department or as a function to winning as a organization? Well, think about that. How much information do the leaders share with the employees about, their competitive position, or what their customers really think about them, or how do they stack up to the competitor?
Yeah.
In on-time delivery and cycle times and quality. How do you know if you're winning if you don't know what the scoreboard even looks like?
Yeah.
And too many leaders hold that information close to the vest because, knowledge is power. So they're not willing to share that. And then they wonder why there's not a team atmosphere going on within the rest of the organization. Well, because they have no clue how they're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer that, obviously there's certain things that you don't want to get out, that, certain bits of information that can't get out to the general public. But there's a lot of information you can share with your workers in a way that they can understand it and believe it, to start building that, hey, it's not us fighting against each other. It's we need to beat the competition.
Yeah, I was reflecting on my career a little bit to see, because I read this book a while back, and I kind of used nuggets of it throughout. And there are things in it that worked for me, and there are things with it that didn't work for me. And one of the things that did work for me was forming triads. And because one of the things about the I people is they'll build relationships one-on-one with different people. They don't know how to collaborate. And so like I'll tell John Smith that we talked, or I'll tell John Smith, hey, Dyer and I talked, and this is what we think. But I won't put us all in the same room because I don't know how to collaborate, because it's about me. I need to be the center of all this information. Or I'll be sitting with my boss and be like, you know what? Next time I sit with John, I'll make sure to coach him through that. And I'll use language like that as if I am superior to him, even though we're peers. So when you start creating triads and saying, all conversations have to be in a group of three, it almost starts to break down that dynamic. And that's worked well for me. The other part that you just talked about is that noble cause concept of how do we collectively succeed, and talk about, hey, don't take down that silos, but sharing our stories. But the one thing I made mistake early in my career, I would share my stories, but I wasn't consistent in my communication. And so I think one of the things that's critical to language is to consistently, whatever pace you're going to do, just stick to it. If you're going to say every month I'm going to communicate, then every month you communicate. And make sure that you have different vehicles that speak to the different types of tribe, so that you know that, hey, maybe in this pocket, we have a bunch of victims, and in this pocket, we have a bunch of self over team people. And we need to be able to communicate them frequently on what they need to do. If it means we have to create different forums, if we have to create different platforms to engage people, and people do quality circles sometimes to engage some of these people, those kind of things work. But consistent communication, I think, is another one. And this seems sneaky, but it does work. Injecting informal leaders that are the we people into those triads. And so they're not superior to you, but they might be from a completely different department. But say, hey, when you have this triad, Mohamed and John, make sure that this third person is there, and that this third person already role models those behaviors. And so over time, his goal or her goal is to inject us with role modeling what good looks like. I find that to work really well. It feels a little bit sneaky, but it's strategic in nature, because I might be a victim, you might be an I person, and it's intentional that you put the three of us together so that we could see a different dynamic. So every time I say something sucks, they'd be like, yeah, but look at what we can do. Or when you say he or she could say, well, what about, what could we do together? Or Mohamed, what's your thoughts of what John just said? To ensure that there's a shared decision-making process going on. And the last thing, there's a lot of talk about trust and encouraging a safe space to speak and stuff like that. That's all good and done. But what ritual do you have in place for these people? And what consistent ritual? So going back to our leader stand at work conversations, do you have a ritual that you could consistently visit these tribes or these people to say, hey, how are things going? I made a bunch of decisions last month. Did I mess up on anything? And being vulnerable, and hearing their language. Because if I'm a victim and every single month my leaders are coming to me and telling me I must have messed up on something, you feel it, you tell me what I messed up on. Over time, I'm like, I can't play the victim anymore if they're saying that they suck. So at one point, I have to say, hey, here's the things that you could do better. And you're pulling me out of that victim mentality. And I can't stress enough shared decision making. I think a lot we underestimate, but if you're a person that says it's my house, my rules, you shouldn't be on the bus. That's a very fast way to promote the I mentality in a company. And so I would say these are tactics that have worked for me, but I have learned over time that they take deliberate discipline in order to listen to that language.
Yeah, because think about it, right? How much training time is spent on how to be a good team, right?
Yeah.
And we put training into how to do specific processes. We do training on problem solving. We do training, but one of the things that I talk about in some of the classes I teach is that, if you take a group of random people and throw them in a room, it's not like you can just wave a wand and say, you're now a team, start acting like it. It doesn't work that way, right? They all have their different points of view. They all have their different interests, likes, dislikes, their different personalities, kind of what you've described, where they are on that kind of spectrum. And, how much time and energy is put into helping that group become a team before you've even given their first problem to solve, right? So that's why I'm a huge believer in doing icebreakers and team building exercises and setting up meeting ground rules and discussing the different types of disruptive behaviors before the teams even started into their first opportunity for improvement.
Yep.
Just to start getting people to understand that it's a little more complex to become a good team and to share decision making and figure out how to move forward on a problem than just saying, oh, be a team.
Yeah.
So I think that more organizations need to look at that. How much time do they spend actually helping people understand how to be a team? The other thing is real quick, on the communication side,
Yeah.
you should definitely do what you're talking about. Have your, calendar regimented, kind of, hey, this, we're going to talk on this day, this week, this month, whatever, morning startup meetings, that kind of thing. But also think out of the box. I remember one plant I was talking to a group of people and workers, and I'm like, how much time do you spend with your internal customer? And they looked at me like I was speaking, a different language. And I'm like, well, first of all, who is your internal customer? And they're like, well, they're all the way on the other side of the plant. We never, and I'm like, okay, how much time do you spend over there talking to them? And finally, one of them raised their hand and said, I've been working here for 20 years and I've never been over on that side of the plant. I don't even know what they do. I don't even know what their process looks like. No one's ever taken us over there. So I was like, okay, well, that stops now. We're going over there. And it was so fascinating when we took the whole group over there to that, all the way on this side of the plant. And the people looked up from their work and they're like, oh, who are these people? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I pulled them together and I'm like, do you realize these are your internal suppliers? You're talking about how this is wrong, this, and this isn't, have you ever actually spoken to them about this? And it was like, well, no. But again, that victim mentality is, hey, we're going to complain and complain and complain, but we don't even know who the people are that supply us this. So what's being done to create that, holistic team environment within the organization and breaking down those barriers? That's important too.
You mentioned something in a few podcasts back that I want to just kind of highlight as we come to a close here, is when you really pay attention to the language. If I'm an individual who is an I individual, I thrive on firefighting. Because if I get promoted because of that, then the organization, the criteria they have set is that the I people are the ones. It doesn't matter who they stomp on. It doesn't matter if they're a bull in a china shop. They get the job done, and so they're worthy of being promoted. If I'm coming into a transformation and I see these individuals and I use them as my change agents, I could actually make the company worse. And so, however, and this is for anyone that's listening that's a change agent, a leader, or a practitioner, be careful who you select, because a lot of times the people that are going to gravitate to you are the I people. And don't automatically shun out the resistors just because they're victims. And so it took me a long time to understand that things like Kaizens and stand-up meetings and Gemba walks are intended so that you could listen to the language of the organization. And then it's your job to understand what tribe you have in front of you and what's your tactic to change that language. If you could change the language, you could change the company. But if you can't change the language, then it's not going to happen. And you can't change the language without some disciplines and systems in place. And it kind of stuck with me when you said it the first time a few years back, but unless you change that criteria, it's not going to happen. And so if I'm promoting more I's versus we's, sometimes I'll tell people, hey, watch who speaks first in a meeting, or see who talks over other people when they're talking, because they probably think they're smarter than everyone. And if that's the person leading your transformation, you have a problem on your hands.
Right. So very good. All right. Well, we'll continue this discussion next week.
Sounds like a plan. All right, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care.
As we draw the curtains on another fascinating episode, we wanted to express our gratitude for joining us on this enlightening journey. If you're hungry for more captivating and thought-provoking discussions with John Dyer and Dr. Mohamed Saleh, hit that subscribe button to ensure you don't miss a beat. Until next week, keep exploring, stay inquisitive, and stay inspired. See you on the next Behind the Curtain adventure.